you're a fan of Star Wars The Force Unleashed, or just Star Wars games in general, you're gonna want to check this out. Something just came across my desk that blew my mind and made me entirely rethink what a Star Wars game could be. I recently discovered and fully read a book titled The Art of Making Star Wars The Force Unleashed. This book goes into excruciating detail about the casting of Force Unleashed, the technology used, tons of early concept art, and even conversations with George Lucas. Even though all of this was a ton of fun to read, what I found most interesting about this book were the early concepts and game ideas that eventually evolved into The Force Unleashed. We're talking about some really cool ideas. There were ideas for a Darth Maul game, a Boba Fett game, or even a Yoda game. There's just so much cool stuff in here, I had to share it with you. So let's dive right in. This book was written by the project lead for Force Unleashed, W. Hayden Blackman, and his assistant producer, Brett Rector. And when you first open the book, you're not only greeted by some stunning concept art, but also a foreword by Hayden Christensen that provides a lot of insight into the project. Now, when the game was first being developed, the team was small, just 5 to 10 people. They began working on 3 solid concepts that would help build the foundation of The Force Unleashed. One of the first concepts they explored was Star Wars Underworld. This game focused completely on the life of a smuggler, similar to what we now see in Star Wars Outlaws, but honestly, it sounds way more fleshed out. You would play as someone like Han Solo, or maybe even Han Solo himself, with a customizable ship and the ability to hire your own crew. The missions for this game would have involved smuggling runs, starship raids, or even attacks on the Empire. What surprised me the most about this game was that it would have included factions like the Black Sun and the Pikes. This was being discussed way back in 2005, long before these criminal factions had become prominent in films and shows today. For a while, this concept, Star Wars Underground, was the frontrunner, but 2 main obstacles emerged. First, the team was concerned about what kind of long-term goal the player could have as a smuggler. They struggled to find a good overarching story. Second, they were worried about whether or not they had the resources to create such an expansive, intelligent game that spanned the entire galaxy. The concept would have taken a lot of time and money to bring to life. They were imagining a StarCraft scale of a game, which would have been very difficult to achieve at the time. Their next concept was titled Jedi Outlaw, and honestly, this might be my favorite of all the ideas they came up with. This game would have been set 500 years after Episode 6, during a time when the Sith and Jedi had reached some sort of truce. There would be no Jedi Council, just the Council, with members from both the Sith and Jedi working together. In this game, you would have played as a kind of Jedi sheriff, hunting down criminals, defending planets, and pursuing leads on galactic threats. But as you carry out your duties, you're framed for the murder of a Jedi and become an outlaw. The player's goal? To redeem themselves, find out who framed them, and seek revenge. While this concept sounds awesome and gave the team complete freedom to write any story they wanted in this wide open time period, they feared it didn't offer the widespread appeal they were looking for. However, this concept is where the team really started to hone in on the intense Force abilities and lightsaber combat that we eventually saw in The Force Unleashed. The third and last main concept that they developed was called Rebel Warrior, and it started with a simple drawing, a Wookiee ripping off the head of an AT-ST and throwing it at stormtroopers. In this game, the player would have controlled that Wookiee at the beginning of the rebellion, with customizable missions and characters. You would have not only been able to choose your own objectives and your own story, but also customize your own Wookiee that had access to inhuman strength and overly powerful abilities. Sounds awesome, right? Well, while members of the team really liked the idea of a strong, overly powerful character, the team worried that players might struggle to connect with a Wookiee as easily as they would with a human character, especially because Wookiees can't talk. To solve this, they were going to pair the Wookiee with a female gunsmith sidekick who would serve as your companion throughout the game. With these 3 concepts ready, Star Wars Underworld, Jedi Outlaw, and Rebel Warrior, the team had the main ideas that they were ready to pitch to Lucas. But during this time, other concepts were also being worked on, including a Darth Maul game. The team looked at creating a game for almost every major Star Wars character, including Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Boba Fett, Yoda, and even Princess Leia. But the Darth Maul concept stood out and received the most attention. In this game, players would control Darth Maul before the events of Episode 1, hunting down the Emperor's enemies, including several Jedi, while mastering fast-paced lightsaber combat combined with Force powers. Ultimately though, the team felt restricted by this idea and wanted more freedom to create an original story. Another concept that was quickly scrapped was Jedi Master, a darker, more violent twist on the Jedi Knight series, set right after Episode 3. But as they fleshed out that idea, the team realized the game was going to be too derivative of its predecessor. And finally there was Jedi Prime, with the tagline, "Become the galaxy's first Jedi." This game sought to answer the question, who discovered the Force, and how was the first lightsaber built? The villain of this game would have been the galaxy's first Sith, and although this concept was really interesting, the team decided to focus on fully fleshing out the Jedi Outlaw concept instead. When they were finally ready to pitch these ideas, they met George Lucas at Skywalker Ranch, and he emphasized the need for drama, comedy, and mainstream appeal in any Star Wars story. He even gave the team an early look into the production of the then in development Clone Wars series. The team then pitched their 3 concepts for their new game. First off, Star Wars Underworld, which Lucas liked, but felt the Han Solo storyline wasn't strong enough to stand on its own, which is kind of ironic coming from Lucas back in 2005, looking at how the Disney movie turned out. Next, they showed him Rebel Warrior, which he liked the setting of, but he disagreed with the team's portrayal of a superhuman Wookiee. If they wanted to move forward with this concept of a Rebel Warrior, he suggested creating a new alien species as the protagonist. Lastly, with Jedi Outlaw, Lucas felt it was too far removed from the existing films, but he did like the idea of introducing new Force powers. This feedback from Lucas laid the foundation for what would eventually become The Force Unleashed. After this meeting with George, the team felt like none of their ideas were outright winners, but they had a clear direction. They now knew that they wanted their game to be set between episodes 3 and 4, focusing on the birth of the rebellion and introducing new Force powers. This gave birth to the early concepts of Force Unleashed, which was originally titled Rebel Jedi. In Rebel Jedi, the player would have been an Imperial agent, hiding their connection to the Force while hunting down enemies of the Empire. Eventually, the player would be betrayed, outed as a Force user, and would then be forced to fight waves of Imperial forces, bounty hunters, and other villains. The player's quest for revenge would lead them to becoming one of the founders of the Rebel Alliance, meeting characters like Princess Leia and Bail Organa along the way. The gameplay for this game would have combined gadgets and weapons with Force abilities and lightsaber combat, and many animations were made with this design in mind. One in particular showcased a carbonite gun which would freeze players and then have them shatter away with Force attacks. Another showed a stormtrooper being lit on fire with a flamethrower and then being thrown to his comrades, setting them all ablaze. While this concept was very close to what The Force Unleashed would become, it was ultimately rejected by LucasArts for straying too far away from the core principles of what it means to be a Jedi. This is where The Force Unleashed truly took shape. The team took elements from all their previous concepts and decided that the protagonist, Starkiller, would be Darth Vader's secret apprentice. The final concept was put on paper in only 2 sentences: Darth Vader's secret apprentice and The Force Unleashed. With this clear vision, all they needed was George Lucas's approval. They sent a long memo to Lucas, filled with questions like, can we use Princess Leia? Can we show the beginning of the rebellion? And can we have a fight with the Emperor? They eagerly awaited his response, and when it finally came back, well, just take a look.
We had to actually put the story and the outline in a memo form to George.
It was a day when, we heard that the fax was coming and everybody rushed around the fax machine.
We just stood there looking at the fax machine, waiting for it to come out.
And the pages start coming through and then the machine jammed and we're running to get new paper and fix it. And so we actually have this great crumpled fax that came through that we, got and put together.
And you could immediately see that he had checked off basically yes, 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 all the way through, added a couple of great comments.
And with George Lucas's approval, the team was ready. They ended up going on to make the great game that we know today. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing. A very small percentage of those who watch my channel are actually subscribed, and it really helps out a lot. Also, check out my other Star Wars videos. They're all here in a playlist. As always, I appreciate you watching. Don't forget to like and consider subscribing, and I'll see you next week.